j'ai du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
Just today, the White House unveiled an economic stimulus plan that would provide roughly $60 billion for the airline and cruise industry, although many have been arguing it doesn't do enough for regular workers, for people battling healthcare-related bankruptcy or student debt. Plus, the restaurant industry as a whole gets no bailout under this plan. One restaurateur in New York saying the entire crisis for the industry is actually, quote, worse than after 9/11. Quarantine policies and closures forcing restaurants and bars all over the nation to close. This is an incredible stress on the owners, on the waiters, on the cooks, and on the bartenders.
It'll be harder for our servers, our hosts, our back of the house, because they're not going to have any income for the next 3 weeks.
One, it's going to hurt the economy so much, and two, we're going to have tons of people filing for unemployment.
It's devastating on so many levels.
Most people live paycheck to paycheck, right? We're mom and pops. We're small business. We count on every day, every week.
We're talking about small and local businesses all around the country. So to get into this and not just do the national news that we've been doing for much of the hour, I want to talk to one person who really knows this world. Marcus Samuelsson joins me by phone. He is the owner and head chef of the popular Red Rooster restaurant in Harlem, New York. In fact, you may remember we actually happened to speak to voters there about the Democratic primary. We were at that flagship location just last month. He is an entrepreneur and an expert on this industry and knows a lot of people affected. Thanks for hopping on the line.
Thank you so much, Ari, for having me. And, you know, it's unbelievable that just a month ago we were here. You were here with your team at Red Rooster, and so much has changed just in a couple of weeks.
Yes, it's something that has affected so many people. But when you look at outside of the initial folks who are dealing with, of course, the actual health crisis, patients, healthcare workers, et cetera.
Yeah.
When you see who is affected most in business, there's a lot of people who could lose their jobs over this, which is a significant disruption that they did nothing to cause, obviously.
No.
Walk us through what you're seeing on the front lines in terms of the problem.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, our community is in a huge crisis, right? This is the toughest thing that we've ever dealt with. And this bailout has to reach the restaurant community, the workers, the small businesses, and not just big businesses. Every time there's a bailout, it reaches huge businesses, big businesses, and that's important too. But the restaurant industry employs over 15 million people, and just as much as people live paycheck to paycheck, so does small businesses, so does restaurants. And we need this bailout to really reach the cooks, the dishwasher, the servers, the bartenders. This is a huge crisis, and I don't see, in Harlem, where through Red Rooster we employ over 180 people, and there's so many different communities that are impacted on this, right? The people who supply us vegetables, the people who supply us fish and meat and so on, and everyone. When a restaurant shuts, when a neighborhood restaurant shuts, it impacts so many more people than people can imagine. That's the lower economy. Yeah.
Let me ask you, Marcus, from your expertise, as I mentioned, you're a restaurateur involved in several restaurants. Yeah. What is the amount of time that a typical restaurant in a typical part of the United States can stay closed before they have to look at layoffs or even other more drastic measures?
Traditionally, it is a low-margin business to begin with, right? And restaurants don't save up a lot of cash. They put it straight back in. And, we had spring is a big moment for these restaurants. We came out of difficult winter. We've changed, our business has changed so much with different types of laws that we have to adjust to. So to have this hit us now, it's devastating. And, every restaurant employs employs enormous amount of people. And I just feel like, when people discuss around politics that we're going to get $1,000 to workers in a couple of months, that's not fast enough. The restaurant workers need it now. The small businesses need help now. The bailout needs to reach us. And, I can compare this. I grew up in Sweden, for example, and this is when you need government. When you have a crisis like this is what you need government for, right? This is a crisis that has, no one's fault. It just happened. And, here, we want the companies to take care of all this, but in Sweden, for example, if an employee gets unemployed, he can file for unemployment, and the government takes care of that. Health care, sick pay, the government takes care of that. That's what you pay taxes for. Here, it's up to the companies, and the companies here just doesn't have enough. The small businesses just doesn't have enough money to take care of that, and we need it now. We need the government to step in and help the workers, small businesses right now. This is a crisis like never before.
Marcus Samuelsson, we wanted to devote some time here to look at this local aspect, different than some of the federal proposals we've heard about. So I appreciate you jumping on the line, calling in from home. We'll be checking back with you. I'm short on time, but yes, final thought.
Just one thing, there's also in a community like in urban America, there's a lot of food insecurity. And, restaurants like Red Rooster would love to, become community kitchens. But, it's also about safety. So we have to make sure that before we do that, we need to know what is the safest way to serve people. How can we link with City Meals on Wheels and City Harvest and groups like that? So imagine all the food insecure people in Harlem right now, next week, where they're going to get the food from. This is, we have to think through it in so many different levels. It's not just big businesses. This is about people. This is about neighborhood. This is about the hospitality community as a whole.
It is Wednesday, the 18th of March of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of these meddlesome priests? Well, speaking of meddlesome, looks like Trish Reagan from Fox. Yeah, she's out on her ear. She said some very untoward things. Some people would call them lies about coronavirus, because Fox is a propaganda channel, of course. But apparently, with the reality of the coronavirus and COVID-19 looming so directly in everybody's face, looks like everybody's tune has changed. Even Donald Trump has taken on an air of seriousness. And when that guy takes on an air of seriousness, boy, he is so dour. Just mumbles along. Oh boy. But talk about tax cuts or an opportunity to make a lot of money, getting your VIG on every single coronavirus test that we can make. Because we turned down the World Health Organization's kits. Because we had to buy those. Those were offered free to countries unable to pay. And the reason we didn't get the World Health Organization test kits is because we had to pay. And Donald Trump wants the world to buy our kits, except for one thing. They did not work. That's why we are behind the 8 ball. Our kits did not work. Donald Trump and Jared were going to make money. And they held up those test kits so that they could make some money. And instead, they have defective test kits. I would say the next step is to have a product liability lawsuit, class action. And I think then every U.S. citizen should get way more than $1,000 one time. They should be getting about $1,500 a month until the fine that will be imposed for holding up the World Health Organization test kits so you can make money off of the U.S. test kits, when the fines for that have been paid through the $1,500 a month to every U.S. citizen. You know, this aid package, this stimulus package is what? It's around $1 trillion. But the money, the $1,000 one-time payment to U.S. citizens is just a fraction of that. What's the rest of that money going for? Why don't we know about that? Could it be going to ICE to continue rounding up brown people during a pandemic? Could it be? They're going to close the schools. Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, just warned people or made them aware, those school closures could be going on until and through the summer break. That's a bit of time from now. The schools are closed. Businesses are closed. You can't even sit down and have a beer. You got to get it from the to-go window? Bars have to-go windows? I doubt it. But regardless, ICE is still on the job. They're there to protect you and me from... No, you and me. Because we are constitutionalists and ICE is the Gestapo. Well, they do have historical precedent. The Nazis never stopped rounding up the Jews and stopped gassing them just because there was an influenza outbreak during the time that they were rounding up Jews and throwing them in concentration camps to gas. They didn't stop their efforts because they were afraid of spreading influenza. Why should ICE be concerned now? They've got a job to do, and they're going to do it because... when you love your job, it's not work. No, it's not work. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, at the top, with so many small businesses shuttered by coronavirus, bar and restaurant workers push D.C. for a bailout too. Why should just the airlines get it? In fact, why should the airlines get any of it? They could have avoided their stock buybacks and maybe saved some money for a rainy day. Why do we have to pay for their irresponsible business practices? Why? On the rest of the menu, Joe Biden finally gets Secret Service protection after repeatedly being accosted by protesters. I gotta say, that all-woman security detail that Joe has, they're pretty tough. I wouldn't be messing around with them. The FBI is probing if a foreign government is behind the denial of service attack on the Health and Human Services Agency. Yeah, we wonder. I bet it is, because Vlad is always on the job. He always is. And the Russian firm indicted by Mueller is set to file a $50 billion suit against the U.S. after Bill Barr dropped the charges to cover up their involvement in the 2016 election attack. What is the thanks we get? A $50 billion lawsuit. On the other hand, maybe Bill Barr and Donald Trump will get a portion of that. I wonder. In fact, I bet they do. After the break, we then move to the chef's table, where China is set to expel American reporters after the U.S. curbed its media. Well, it's just a tit for tat. And a medical device manufacturer is set to sue a group of volunteers in Italy who 3D printed replicas of an $11,000 valve used for life-saving coronavirus treatments, and they printed it up for about $1. So, of course, they're going to be sued. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. Hopefully you'll notice that Patreon link. Now, if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, that recurring contribution allows us to not only pay our bills, but also to purchase the needed machinery that is required, because the machinery that we have is really quickly wearing out. They've been working like a workhorse for 4 years now of our 9-year run at Resistance Radio. Yeah, that's 5 more than a lot of the other content providers that we've had along the way. Yeah, they lasted just about 5 years, and unfortunately, some people have to just go off and live their own lives. But we're here because we have a civic duty that was set forth upon us by the founders. They originally intended for us to be Resistance Radio constitutionally, long before the writing and signing of the Constitution. Maybe even all the way back to the Magna Carta, maybe. But we have been mandated as Resistance Radio, and we've been fulfilling our civic duty because of your generosity, and we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for doing so. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so by simply going to @NetrootsRadio. Tom takes care of that, and we thank Tom for doing that. I take care of @JusticePutnam, and I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that posted out on social media, except for Facebook, because Facebook has suspended me for 30 days because of political speech. Political speech. In a tiny 1,125 person private group on Facebook that is called Uncensored Ashland Peeps. Uncensored! So we get to have uncensored anti-abortion pictures of bloody fetuses on sidewalks. Can't get rid of those. We have post after post after post of misogynistic bigotry, racism, white nationalism, pro-Trump, lock up brown people and icebox baby gulags as if that's a good thing. All of that gets to remain. But say effing Trump, effing Vlad, they're all Vichy collaborators, and that is called harassing speech, and you will be suspended, and in my case, 30 days. So, fortunately, we do have a team here at Netroots Radio, and our social media director, thank you, Kelly, is picking up the slack in getting our Facebook posts posted on Facebook, because we are smarter than the Trump brats, and always have been, and we always will be. And why deny it? I mean, we're not really bragging now, are we? Or are we? If you would like to follow the show on Twitter, do so at Cookbook West. And most importantly, pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Well, looks like Bernie's got a hard row to hoe. Biden picked up quite a few delegates last night. Some people are calling it a slam dunk. And then other people are saying, I will never vote for a Democrat, ever. I will not do it until the old guard are replaced. You know who the old guard are that they're talking about replacing? The Congressional Black Caucus. Yeah, the old guard. I think you're making a grave mistake, Bernie bros and babes. Please. We should be voting for the Democratic candidate. Once again, I don't remember any Shirley Chisholm supporters that I worked with back when we were all working on Shirley Chisholm's campaign. I don't remember anyone saying, we will never vote for a Democrat. We never will. No, they got behind McGovern. All right, let's be clear. I had to get behind Dukakis. If I got behind Dukakis, you can get behind whoever the Democratic candidate is this time, and you know who that's going to be. And I got to tell you, he ain't Dukakis. Bernie would be the only one to beat Trump if all of us voted for him if he was the Democratic candidate. Of course. But to threaten to vote for Trump or to vote for another third-party candidate because you can't vote for the Democratic candidate because of the old guard, the Congressional Black Caucus? You are going to go against the Congressional Black Caucus? And I really think that in spite of the coronavirus out there, the vast numbers of people who came out in numbers not seen in a very long time made their voices loud and clear. Get behind the Democratic candidate. We're in the fight for our lives. No one said, I'm not voting for anybody because Shirley didn't get it. No. No one said, I'm not voting for the Democrat because my candidate didn't prevail in the primaries and the caucuses. No, they got behind the Democratic candidate in the general. And that is how we win. Let's get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Zeke Mueller and Alexandra Jaffe of the Associated Press bring us this first offering. Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden, who has been repeatedly accosted by protesters on the campaign trail, is receiving U.S. Secret Service protection beginning this week, the agency said. Well, it's already Wednesday. Does he have it yet? Biden made the request earlier this month, after a handful of testy interactions with protesters at recent campaign events, including one in which two protesters rushed a stage in Los Angeles and came within a few meters of Biden, actually a few feet. During a Super Tuesday victory speech, Biden's wife Jill and several staff members, including one trained security officer employed by the campaign, restrained the women and carried them from the stage. Neither the former vice president nor his wife was hurt. The leading candidates in the 2012 and 2016 presidential elections had Secret Service protection by this point in those races. Neither Biden nor Democratic primary rival Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders had requested protection until now. Sanders still has not made a request. The Secret Service protects, by statute, the president and vice president and their families, as well as some other senior government officials. It is also authorized to provide protection to major party presidential candidates, an authority granted after the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy in 1968. And my dad and I were at the Ambassador Hotel earlier that night. My dad was drafting policy papers for the State Democratic Steering Committee, and we went to watch the results come in, though it was getting late by the time, late for me because I was still in junior high. By the time Kennedy made it to the podium to give his victory speech, we were well on our way back to the San Gabriel Valley when he was assassinated that terrible June 4th of 1968. Michael Balsamo of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Attorney General William Barr vowed in an interview with the AP yesterday, Tuesday, that there would be swift and severe action if a foreign government is behind disinformation campaigns aimed at spreading fear in the U.S. amid the coronavirus pandemic, or the denial of service attack on the networks of the Department of Health and Human Services. Our primary role right now is to investigate, Barr said. The FBI is very active, trying to determine who is responsible for these things. Well, could it be the people in the next article we're going to be going through? You know, the ones that you dropped charges against? The charges that were brought by Mueller against Russian companies and individuals, 12 in total, all working for Vlad. Would they be the major actors in this disinformation campaign like they were in all the rest? Yes, I know. There's other countries involved in the disinformation. But who is the major one? The mind reels trying to figure that one out. A denial of service attack occurs when a perpetrator trying to make a network unavailable to its intended user temporarily disrupts internet connections. U.S. national security officials said there had been a cyber incident involving the computer networks of the Health and Human Services Department, but the networks were operating normally. They did not detail the scope of the incident, but HHS Secretary Alex Azar later said the networks were not penetrated and that the department had taken a strong defensive action. It came just days after federal officials began confronting what they said was a deliberate effort by a foreign entity to sow fears of a nationwide quarantine amid the virus outbreak. Agencies took coordinated action Sunday evening to deny that any such plans were put in place as they tried to calm a nation already on edge by disruptions to daily life caused by the coronavirus. And should I say the ineptitude, or was it on purpose, of the Trump administration? The complete incompetence. Or could it just be their own illegal greed that has brought on this uncertainty? Barr told the AP the federal government would take action against anyone who was trying to take advantage of the crisis or against foreign governments that could be trying to spread misinformation to stoke fear or slow down the U.S. response to the virus. He did not speculate which government may be behind it. Now, I want to make sure that I understand this correctly. Barr is going to go and take action against anyone who is trying to take advantage of the crisis? Well, as far as I know, ICE, the Department of Homeland Security, is taking advantage. I would even argue that Donald Trump, the leader of the free world, is taking advantage of it. Rumors about the government's response to the spreading virus have circulated online for weeks, prompting authorities in several states to urge residents to seek out trusted sources in government and news. Barr said he had not been involved in any conversations and wasn't aware of any plans for a potential national quarantine, which means they've talked about it, and they're not only going to do it, they're trying to figure out how to make some money. On Monday, Barr directed U.S. attorneys across the U.S. to prioritize prosecuting all criminal conduct related to the current pandemic. In a memo, he warned that the Justice Department, wait a second, you are the Department of Justice, William Barr. I am the Justice Department. I am going to start sending out those letters. I want my royalty payments, and I want it during the pandemic. Barr had seen reports of people selling fake cures for the coronavirus, phishing emails, posing as official notices from the CDC and the World Health Organization, and malware inserted in apps designed to track the spread of the virus. Those cases remain under investigation, Barr said. Our primary role is to police the market and make sure people are not taking advantage, he said. For most people, the new coronavirus causes only mild or moderate symptoms, such as fever and cough. For some, especially older adults and people with existing health problems, it can cause more severe illness, including pneumonia. The worldwide outbreak has sickened now more than 250,000 people and left more than 8,000 people dead. In the United States, there have been more than 4,000 confirmed cases and scores of deaths. That has to do with Russia would be by anonymous worker bees, and indeed is the case now, with anonymous worker bees responsible for this last offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And these anonymous worker bees are anonymously working for Reuters, a Russian firm accused of meddling in the 2016 U.S. presidential election, said it planned to file a $50 billion lawsuit, that's $50 billion, against the United States after a U.S. federal judge dismissed the criminal case against it. Concord Management and Consulting, LLC, was accused of funding a propaganda operation to tilt the 2016 vote in favor of Trump. The case was set to be tried next month, but the case was dismissed on Monday at the request of U.S. prosecutors. You mean Bill Barr? Prosecutors questioned the merit of holding the trial, saying Concord had tried to use case evidence to discredit the investigation, refused to cooperate, and that there were also challenges raised by some evidence being classified as secret. Why would Bill Barr classify these investigations into the criminal conduct of a hostile foreign power secret? But also, let's be very clear. This strategy of using free democracies' laws and their openness in their laws and judicial system is used by Putin repeatedly against those democracies to undermine them from within. The firm's executive, Evgeny Prigozhin, a businessman with ties to Vladimir Putin, you know, the guy who has the catering franchise there, Putin's chef. And he was also charged in the case, but was not expected to attend the trial in the United States. Yesterday, Tuesday, Concord hailed the dismissal of the case as a victory and said it was proof the case had been based on lies aimed at blaming Russia for the United States' own domestic problems. Yeah, really? A $50 billion Concord versus U.S. lawsuit for unlawful prosecution and sanctions is currently being drawn up, it said in a statement. Prigozhin and Concord were both charged in 2018, along with 12 other individuals and 2 other entities, with conspiracy to defraud the U.S. for their role in election meddling aimed at sowing discord in the United States, and now they're giving us the finger. Bill Barr needs to be locked up because he is a fishy collaborator. And there's more to this story, and you know it will be revealed. Well, let's get to our break now. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again. From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, The Land of the Women. Portrait of a Lady on Fire took home the screenplay honors at Cannes last year, and it is a rare film. Not only is it written and directed by a woman, but nearly the entire cast is female. Although set in pre-revolutionary France, the theme here, much like in the recent redo of Little Women, deals with a woman's ability to live life on her own terms. Told in flashback, the story centers around a painter, Mary Ann, who arrives on a remote island off Brittany to do a portrait of Heloise, apparently demanded by a remote suitor. But this is no typical assignment. Mary Ann has been hired by Heloise's mother and must paint Heloise without her knowledge. We learn the previous painters had failed due to a lack of cooperation from Heloise. Before she figures out what's happening, though, the two warm to each other, and we discover that originally Heloise's older sister was supposed to marry the suitor, who was identified only as an Italian nobleman. Rather than do that, the sister had chosen to take her own life. It suggested that the family's fortunes are in decline and that the marriage is largely a business arrangement. Heloise also misses the convent from which she's been recalled, which, while not perfect, did supply her with a degree of freedom that her future life would likely lack. This situation is recapitulated in a subplot involving the family maid Sophie, who finds herself with an unwanted pregnancy. Love is found in this movie, but much like the shades of a watercolor, it doesn't necessarily last. Lead Adele Haenel, who looks like a young Kate Winslet, is amazing as Heloise, and Naomi Merlan as Mary Ann isn't far behind. Portrait of a Lady on Fire is an amazing period piece and will definitely warm your soul. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Adam Levy. Open up a clam and you might see the making of a tasty snack. You probably wouldn't expect to find the history of our planet. But that's what researchers have been deducing from a 70-million-year-old fossil clam. They opened up this mollusk's secrets by drilling a small hole in its shell with a laser and analyzing the pattern of growth.
So we make a cross-section through the shell. And you see the layers, the growth layers of the shell, a bit like the layers of a tree. And that's allowed us to really count the number of days in a year that far back in time.
Niels de Winter, paleoclimatologist at the Free University of Brussels in Belgium. Using a laser to carefully count the number of growth rings in a 70-million-year-old fossil might seem like quite a laborious way to find out the number of days in a year. After all, we all know the answer is 365 and 366 in leap years, right?
That's interesting because what we found is actually that there were not 365 days in a year, so there were a few more.
You see, Earth's spin on its axis gradually slows down over time. The reduction is due to the friction from Earth's tides, which are driven by the moon's orbit. Back to that ancient clam. By measuring the rings on this mollusk's shell, the team was able to put a precise number on the history of this process. 70 million years ago, the faster rotation of the Earth meant there were just 23.5 hours in a day. And measuring more shells might reveal more information about our planet's past.
It would be very interesting to apply this on other shells, maybe also at the same time, but also at different times, so we can kind of map out much better how this evolution took place.
Scientists already use fossilized shells to reveal details of the Earth's ancient climate. And now De Winter is hoping that he can read this preserved weather record in extra fine detail. This work could teach us about the climate of the distant past, and maybe even help scientists better understand the climate change happening today.
We might actually be able to extract things at a very, very high resolution about climates that far back in time. The prospect of being able to get this information at this scale is very exciting for a climate scientist like myself.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Adam Levy.
This is a message from CDC.
After hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods, standing water and excess moisture help mold grow in your home, garage, and other structures. When you return to a home that has been flooded, know that you're likely to have mold. Mold puts your family's health at risk. If you have mold growing in your home, you should clean it up and fix other water problems, such as leaks in roofs, walls, or plumbing. Keep your children and pets out of affected areas until you've cleaned. Control moisture in your home to prevent mold growth. To remove mold growth from hard surfaces, use commercial products, soap and water, or a bleach solution of no more than 1 cup of household laundry bleach in 1 gallon of water. Follow the manufacturer's instructions. Never mix bleach with ammonia or other household cleaners. It will produce dangerous, toxic fumes. Open windows and doors to provide fresh air.
For more information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
This Civil Liberties Minute, one in a series on the coronavirus COVID-19, focuses on the vulnerable population of persons who live paycheck to paycheck and those who cannot count on a paycheck at all.
I'm Lily Ledbetter, and this is a Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
During this public health crisis, it is crucial to ensure that people are not deterred from seeking care. Towards that end, one crucial step that state and federal governments should take is to ensure that people who are sick and or who should stay home are adequately supported. This means income support for workers who don't have paid sick leave. And it means that there should be a guarantee that those persons who cannot or should not report to work cannot be fired. In addition, governments should work with employers and or pass legislation and or implement administrative policies that ensure that workers who voluntarily stay home when engaged appropriately in self-quarantine in order to protect their fellow workers and community members, those persons should receive adequate support or paid leave. Vulnerable populations deserve access to adequate food and medicine, and federal and state governments have a responsibility to ensure that this public health crisis does not take people who live near the financial edge and push them over it.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1968. That was the day the staff at radio station KMPX in San Francisco went out on strike. The radio station had broken new ground with their underground rock format. In 1967, the station hired Tom Big Daddy Donahue as a DJ. Prior to that time, the station had aired mostly foreign language programming. Their new DJ brought a new, cutting-edge style to the radio dial. Instead of playing the big hits of the day, as most radio stations did, Donahue played local artists and songs you would not hear on other programs. Soon the station had fully transitioned to music programming. It featured a mix of rock, folk, and blues. Sometimes DJs even spun full albums like the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band. Soon, the popularity of the programming led the owners to lend Donahue to KPPC out of Pasadena, California. Stretched thin, tensions over creative differences soon mounted between Donahue and the owners. When Donahue was replaced, the rest of the staff walked off the job. The owner hired replacement workers, and bands like the Rolling Stones, the Grateful Dead, and Joan Baez boycotted the station. The Grateful Dead held 3 benefit concerts for the strikers. Creedence Clearwater Revival played a street concert from the back of a flatbed truck to support their cause. The strike lasted 8 weeks before Donahue and some of the staff found a new gig at another station. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
I read the news today, oh boy. It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
The U.S. death toll surpassed 100 on Tuesday, and over 6,000 cases have now been confirmed. All 50 states have now reported cases. Globally, the number of confirmed cases has now eclipsed 200,000, and the number of deaths has topped 8,000. And the leaders of 26 nations in the European Union voted on Tuesday to temporarily close their borders to people from countries outside of the EU to help slow the spread of the novel coronavirus. The travel ban marked the first joint response to the pandemic in the EU. The measure also prohibits sending medical supplies to other countries. The ban, which Britain didn't plan to join, will remain in place for at least 30 days. EU leaders said they would continue the free circulation of goods within the zone. European citizens and residents returning home will be allowed in. Medical professionals and scientists also will be exempt. France and Spain also announced massive relief packages to soften the economic damage of the crisis. To combat the economic devastation that coronavirus is leaving in its wake, the White House has announced that it is looking to send checks directly to Americans. The announcement comes as many parts of the United States have taken extraordinary measures to halt the spread of the coronavirus. California officials announced a complete lockdown of the Bay Area, including San Francisco, that requires people to stay home except for essential needs, a measure that New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio says he is also considering. Tuesday was another devastating day at the polls for Bernie Sanders in Florida, Arizona, and Illinois, where in-person voting turnout was low, but early voting in Florida and Arizona pushed Biden to clear victories. In Ohio, polls were ordered closed as a public health measure after a judge declined the governor's request to postpone the election. On Wednesday morning, Sanders' campaign manager, Fez Shakir, released a statement saying that the senator is going to be having conversations with supporters to assess his campaign. Noting that the next primary is at least 3 weeks away, he said, in the immediate term, Bernie is focused on the government response to the coronavirus outbreak and ensuring that we take care of working people and the most vulnerable. One very good piece of news emerged from Illinois' 3rd District, where challenger Marie Newman beat 8-term incumbent Dan Lipinski, who, although he has a D next to his name and enjoyed the full support of the DCCC, was known for his staunch opposition to abortion rights and his votes against the Affordable Care Act and same-sex marriage. Way to go, Marie Newman. China announced retaliatory measures against several U.S. media outlets on Tuesday, following America's recent decision to designate 5 Chinese state media outlets as foreign mission outlets and cap the number of Chinese journalists working for those outlets on U.S. soil. U.S. national journalists for the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Washington Post, whose press credentials expire before the end of this year, must return their press cards and were banned from reporting in the People's Republic of China, including in Hong Kong and Macau, which is typically where journalists blocked by Beijing would go to continue their work. China is also requiring the China offices of those outlets, along with the Voice of America and Time, file written reports on all their staff rosters, finances, operations, and property holdings. This is another escalation between the two countries, and it's being denounced by U.S.-based news outlets. Now, if you were stressing about getting your taxes done by April 15th, you can breathe a small sigh of relief. The deadline has been delayed by 90 days, thanks to the coronavirus. Here are a few things you can do right now. The U.S. Surgeon General is calling on healthy Americans to donate blood. The Red Cross is facing a severe shortage due to blood drive cancellations in response to the coronavirus. And let me reiterate my plea not to forget the animals stuck in shelters. If we're going to be stuck at home for the foreseeable future, this is a great time to adopt or even foster a dog or a cat. Most shelters are still open to the public, but we don't know for how long. And my fear is these animals are going to be neglected or worse. So please consider bringing home an animal who will help you through this period of isolation as much as you'll help them. If you're in South Florida, please feel free to email me, Nicole@NicoleSandler.com. These days, I'm only leaving my home to volunteer at the shelter on weekends. I'll gladly meet you at the Broward County Animal Care and Adoption Center in Fort Lauderdale and help you find your new canine companion. It's that important, and it's that important to me. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I cannot do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com. While you're there, please click on that donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Ouch! Expecting a high of around 58 to 60 today. Considerable clouds this morning, some decreased clouds later in the day. Winds will be light and variable all day and all night, where will be mainly clear overnight with a low in the low 30s. Expecting a high of 64 to 65 tomorrow, with a few clouds from time to time, and winds will remain light and variable throughout the day tomorrow as well. Pollen is rated at none. I don't know why, because I see people sneezing. And I can see all the flower blooms and the trees blooming, and people are sneezing, and yet they say pollen is rated at none. I think that is wrong. Though the air quality index is good in the region at 38 parts per million, and that daytime UV index, though it be in the moderate range, has jumped from 3 to 5, and that was from yesterday to today. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 29.89 inches. Visibility is up to 8 miles. And relative humidity is at 95%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. London is 58 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 64 and partly cloudy. Rome, 67 and sunny. Kyiv, 53 degrees and fair. Kabul, 58 and fair. Hong Kong, 66 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 52 degrees and clear. Sydney, Australia, is 68 degrees and clear. Sorry about that. San Francisco, California, 46 degrees with rain showers. And New York, is 48 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Ken Moritsugu of The Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. China said it will revoke the media credentials of all American journalists at 3 major U.S. news organizations, in effect, expelling them from the country in response to U.S. restrictions on Chinese state-controlled media because they control their media enough. They don't need our help. Thank you very much. Or is that Duabachi? The Foreign Ministry said American citizens working for the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post with credentials expiring before the end of the year must surrender their press cards within 10 days. It is the latest in a series of tit-for-tat actions by the two governments, as the Trump administration takes a more confrontational stance in dealing with China than his predecessors did. The countries remain enmeshed in a trade war despite a recent truce and have traded angry words over the coronavirus pandemic that first emerged in China and has spread worldwide.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Jay Peters of The Verge brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A medical device manufacturer has threatened to sue a group of volunteers in Italy that 3D printed a valve used for life-saving coronavirus treatments. The valve typically costs about $11,000 from the medical device manufacturer because they want to gouge during a pandemic. But the volunteers were able to print replicas for about $1 US. A hospital in Italy was in need of the valves after running out while treating patients for COVID-19. The hospital's usual supplier said they could not make the valves in time to treat the patients. That launched a search for a way to 3D print a replica part, and Christian Fracassi and Alessandro Romioli, who worked at Italian startup Isnova, offered their company's printer for the job. However, when the pair asked the manufacturer of the valves for blueprints they could use to print replicas, the company declined and threatened to sue for patent infringement. So the two moved ahead anyway by measuring the valves and 3D printing 3 different versions of them. So far, the valves they made have worked on 10 patients, and that's as of March 14th. The founder of Italian manufacturing solutions company Fab Lab, who helped recruit Fracassi and Romioli to print the replica valves, said these people were in danger of life, and they acted, period. He also said that the two have no intention of profit on this situation, and the two said, "We are not going to use the designs or product beyond the strict need for us forced to act. We are not going to spread the drawing." Well, if you're going to gouge during a pandemic, you might as well sue anybody trying to help keep people alive now, wouldn't you? Especially when it only costs $1 compared to your $11,000. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio will broadcast on, and we're going to meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. De novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.